Thank you so much for being here to this community webinar hosted by PhotovoiceWorldwide with Dr. Daniela Miranda today presenting. We're absolutely thrilled to have you. And thank you to everyone for being here in community with us today. We are excited for all the learning that we will do during this conversation, and we wanted to respectfully acknowledge that our headquarters are located on the ancestral territories of the Nipmuc peoples in central Massachusetts. This is a small tribute to the Nipmuc Nation's continuing Native community. Thank you. The guidelines for today, we have a small group here. More will join throughout the conversation and community webinar. Some will actually just see this, look at this onto YouTube after we recorded it. But for today, the guidelines is to keep questions to the end. If you have anything that you want to ask Daniela, we'll have a 15 minutes Q&A at the end. But if you want to start dropping your questions in the chat, if you're like me and otherwise will forget, please feel free. I will monitor the chat throughout. As an etiquette and community, of course, we thank you in advance for being professional and kind with your comments. We're all learning from one another, and we're learning also to disagree respectfully in this space. We're recording this today, and you'll receive a link to this recording through Eventbrite. Photovoice Worldwide, that's the name of our social enterprise woman-led. We have Dr. Laura Lorenz here is the co-founder of Photovoice Worldwide, and our tagline is show stories, share power, change lives, because that's what we think Photovoice can do for people. And we hope to see more Photovoice happening all around the globe. And that's why our organization trains, works for community peer-to-peer on Photovoice, does consulting, and creates products on Photovoice. Today, we have Daniela Miranda, from the Center for Community Research and Action at the Universidad de Sevilla with us. I'm absolutely thrilled to present her because when I first found out about Photovoice, one of the first things I found out was her work. So I am a little bit of a fangirl of Daniela Miranda, and I am really excited to have her here. She's a first-generation Latina from the United States. She's built her career in Sevilla, Spain, at the Center for Community Research and Action, and she has specific contributions that have expanded on the fields of community psychology in the Spanish and European context. Her research approaches have aimed really to address the anti-Gypsyism, the specific racism experienced by the Romani communities. Daniela is a postdoctoral research fellow at the Universidad de Sevilla, and she's focused on understanding the methodological implications of co-creation for public health research alongside Romani women and girls. Thank you so much once again for being here. Daniela, I'm going to stop my sharing and okay, I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Okay.
So you can
Erica.
get on your own. Thank you.
Thank you. It's really nice to be here. And also just, I'm also a fangirl of Photovoice Worldwide. So it's perfect. It's mutual. The fangirlness is mutual. I'm going to just share my screen. So I've never done Canva on my sharing. Can you see it? Yep. Unfortunately, I have to make you all a little smaller. Okay, well, thank you, Erica. And so my work is based in Sevilla at the Center for Community Research and Action. And I just wanted to point this out because all the work that I'm going to present is really just a snapshot of work that's been my dissertation, my colleagues' dissertations, and a lot of different projects that we've been working on together with grassroots organizations, but specifically with Roma women and girls. And our center, we consider ourselves a coalition. So we are researchers based in the university and academics, but we also do work with grassroots organizations, local policymakers. And our idea, which I'll get into today, is really around that co-creation. So how can we use Photovoice and other different types of methods from the community psychology area to make public health policies more effective and social policies more effective, especially when working with Roma women, Roma communities, but also colleagues of mine at the center also work really closely to migrants and refugees. And so, well, if you look on our website, you can see the different types of work we're doing, but really the way that we do things is common throughout all our different areas. So our work is really contextualized here in Europe, specifically in Spain. And one of the biggest issues that Europe has had over the last, for a very long time, but there has been some policy efforts. 20 years ago, there was, when the European Union was expanding, people had committed to, different governments had committed to, and activists as well, to addressing anti-Gypsyism in different countries, because I think it is still continues to be 80% of most Roma communities in Europe live above the in absolute poverty. And so one of the main causes has been identified more recently, and it's being addressed as anti-Gypsyism, which is the structural racism towards Roma people. But we work with going down on the ground. We work directly with Roma women and Roma girls, especially around reproductive justice. So how anti-Gypsyism has conditioned the living conditions, and as well the neighborhoods that many of these girls grow up in, live in, go to school in, and the lack of opportunities that there are. We use the sister song definition to understand reproductive justice, going beyond our physical sexual and reproductive rights, but thinking of things as opportunities and references and ways that these contexts give girls opportunities to make multiple choices in their lives. And so our work in Photovoice is really aimed at addressing anti-Gypsyism alongside girls and women. And just to have a shared definition of co-creation, I thought that I could share this slide that how do we use Photovoice in the context of co-creating research, and what does that mean? Right now, I at least know in Europe, it's the hot word, the buzzword, what is co-creation? And for us, it's another way to understand participatory research, but really linked right now in the field of public health. So how are we doing research that's not only recognizing evidence-based, but also how are we recognizing the voices of people as valid evidence as well? And so for us, Photovoice does give us that chance to have conversations between multiple people, listen, exchange knowledge. It's, I'm based out of the university, and as Erica said, I'm from the US, I'm Latina, I'm not from Spain, I'm not Roma. And so creating those relationships and sharing my knowledge and my understandings of the world, and recognizing women living in completely different contexts as my own. And for us, Photovoice is a great tool to understand and do co-creation, because it is not only based on taking the photographs, but really working horizontally. We're thinking of processes more than results driven. It's iterative, so we have the action aspect of it. So the photographs really are just a vehicle for other deeper processes happening between people. I'm a psychologist, a social psychologist. So also we think about how do those relationships between researchers and participants, how they can develop over time with something as powerful as Photovoice. And going back to that as well with co-creation, it's that type of knowledge generation that we in academia and the universities can really help mobilize local knowledge into scientific and science and policy spaces. So Photovoice allows that, because you're generating evidence with photographs, with narratives, you're analyzing information with people. And so we're having that change in relationships as well. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our more recent project. So I'm based in Sevilla. I've been working in a neighborhood that I live in the city center, but just like about 15, 20 minutes out, well, 10 minutes by car, 50 minutes by bus, in a neighborhood called Polígono Sur, which for about 10 years consecutively now, it has been one of the poorest neighborhoods in all of Spain. Despite that, there has been lots of resources, lots of research being done there, it still somehow just hasn't been able to overcome anything. And ever since the COVID as well, there's been a lot of reduction of girls and just students in general. The schools are starting to shut down. The schools have high Roma population, and so it's also segregated schools. So this neighborhood is an interesting place to work, mostly because it is somewhere where research has been for a very long time. So the way that we've done it is we've partnered with a grassroots organization called GILO. They're a group of 4 women, Roma women, and mothers, She works as a mother. Most of them are mothers and have been living there their whole lives. And we partnered with them. And one of the main things that I'm going to be showing you the perspective of the work we've done with the girls. But for us, it's been really important, the work with the women as well, because we've used Photovoice as a way to help the women tell their stories and be able to facilitate that same process with girls. And so the research questions that I'll show throughout the presentation have really been developed alongside the women that we call facilitators. So the women of the GILO grassroots organization are the facilitators of this process alongside academic researchers. So we have different students involved as well. And I do want to point out that all of this is done with a lot of time, because I'm going to show a lot of things, but it's years of work and also years of relationship building with the people that the impact we're starting to have now, starting with Photovoice many years ago, but it's just taken a long time. It's a lot of quality time that we've spent in the neighborhoods. The context of this project, it takes place in a school, but we also try to take it out of the school, but the school was the only setting where we could really recruit the girls to be with us and to have teachers partner with us, and the mothers and parents and families as well. So I did want to point that out, because for us, it's not extractive by any nature. And I think that there's something to be said about that in the way that Photovoice is done and how the relationships are built when you're doing co-creation, and being very critical of the way that we're doing it as well. So this is the Photovoice method. For us, we have the framing the question, taking the photographs. So the girls go out and take photographs in response to the question. I'll be showing different modifications that we've done throughout to make it more adaptable to the girls' age we were working at, the different priorities that they had. In Spanish, there's a word called inquietudes, which is the things that make you vibe. I guess that would be the only word to describe it. So really, it was a very slow process. It wasn't like, okay, here's the framing question. It was a lot of conversations, a lot of group work to really get the framing questions developed. Go out and take photographs. It was, how do you take photographs? What are you taking photographs of? Individual narratives in a group, in small groups, is very loud. A lot of my colleagues had a very hard time. Recordings didn't work for us here. We had to take a lot of notes. And we also do the analysis with the girls and with the women. So for us, it was important to go from every step of the research process was done very intentionally with the women, with the girls. Yeah. We also included, and I wanted to highlight this because later on in the conclusions, it's something I'm thinking about right now with our work. You know, a lot of these young people, including not as young people, everything's digitalized. We have phones, we're all using our phones, we're all taking photographs of our everyday lives, and Photovoice is that. It's taking pictures and questioning, adding that extra layer to taking a photograph. And so we did use a lot of different digital tools that actually just help the Photovoice process to make it more interactive. So for example, it wasn't only that some girls, we gave them cameras, but they preferred their phones. We had TikToks. We also used we used Typeform and Marco Polo, so different way to collect data. It wasn't as straightforward as just going to take photographs, but when we were doing brainstorming, we were making sure that we were using different types of digital tools in a way to build capacity with digitalization as well. So incorporating that vision in the work, especially working with communities that have been experiencing the digital gap, especially after the hardest part of the pandemic and the lockdowns in Spain. Many of these girls, for example, didn't have Wi-Fi in their house, but simply because phone companies won't put in phone lines in those areas, and so couldn't access school, couldn't access a lot of different resources and services that were becoming all digitalized. And so for us, it was important to make sure that resources were going to address that, and also the skills that we were developing through the Photovoice process also reflected trying to address the digital gap as well. So the first step what we did was the questions that were finally developed over some times were, what are your dreams for the future? So basically just another way of asking, what are your priorities? And here's an example of a word cloud we did. So we asked the girls to tell us what their different dreams were. So they're in Spanish, so I'll read you some. Travel, become a mother, be happy, become a vet, hairdresser, live by myself with 5 cats, which is basically my dream as well. Help other people, make my poetry public. So it was a way to just have girls be able to share without maybe directly in a like more violent manner, asking people maybe to express themselves that aren't used to being asked that type of question, to have that time for reflection before going out and taking photographs. And so here are some photos that we found with little snippets of notes that we found as well. So here, I guess this is like to do puppets in theater, and a girl was explaining that she really wanted to make a Disney film one day. They had gone to the local hairdresser to take photographs. And for us, this part of the process, it's also about taking not only girls inside their neighborhood, so you'll see like take advantage of the space that's near the neighborhood, but we also have other photographs that are outside the neighborhood. So using our research resources as well to rent a bus and take the girls outside the neighborhood and get to know the center of town and take pictures there as well, because those are also different spaces to imagine and dream different types of futures. The second part, which is always the trickiest part, after many years, it always seems just as challenging, which is the categorization process and how we analyze evidence and how do you ask the right questions to help people think without getting too much into it and giving your opinion of where it should be categorized. I always find that to be tricky. And I do have to say that I have worked mostly always with adults, which is a very different interaction than with the girls, even if not in the way of treating, but also the way of being able to communicate the types of questions. At least for me, it's very honest, but I found it to be really challenging. The way that we were asking questions had to be in a different way, the way that we were communicating. And some of the categories that came up. So the girls, what are the dreams for the future? So one, friendship. Their dreams for the future. So one category was our dreams. Then there was another one, was solidarity between women, improvements in our neighborhood. So there were a lot of empty parks, lack of green spaces or green spaces that are just unkept. There's also reaching our goals in the process. So there was some photographs of girls studying and saying that was really important to just finish school was a dream as well. And actually something interesting that's not reflected in the presentation, that the work that we had previously done with the group of women, mother of some of these girls, I want to say, well, from the neighborhood, there weren't that different from the dreams that these girls had, in the sense of there was a lot of things around improvement in the neighborhood. There was a lot about friendship and solidarity. Instead of improvements in our neighborhood, there was also spaces to just spend time. So a lot of things, it was interesting because there was this collective narrative just happening between girls in the school and the women that we were doing the work with outside of the school prior to the work that we did here. And so our first questions was, what are your dreams? And then we always do the follow-up question. So, okay, what are your priorities? But what do you need to have? What do you need to make your dreams come true? So what are your resources and who do we need to be asking these resources for? Because we connect our Photovoice process with that idea of co-creation, which is advocating that this all just becomes evidence for the girls, the women, for us researchers, for the organizations to advocate for those dreams and those resources. So here are just a few. So what resources do you need to reach your dreams? Some are think positively, support from my family, good friends, help to continue motivating me, dinero, so money, a lot of times scholarships and stuff like that comes up as well. Things around buses and transportation also come up around the dreams. And so we've also done it in different formats. So we have this word cloud that we did with Mentimeter, but then we also have in another school, we did it and they did it on these colorful pieces of paper. And then with the women, for example, we also did it to where we organized the recommendations as to who are we trying to ask these resources to. So are we asking it to the wider community? Are we asking local policymakers? Are we asking academics? Are we asking our families? Who are we asking the support from? And that process is really helpful as well to be able to, at least in this neighborhood specifically, there are so many organizations and so much local policy happening. The city council is very present there, but there's just so many barriers and the way that resources are being developed. So it's a really helpful way to also just map how things are happening and, well, have specific recommendations for each type of ally. And this is the newest part of, we've always done a smaller photo exhibit in the neighborhoods, but this year we brought together all the work that we had been doing for many years with Photovoice, but also the work developed within the project of the girls and the women. And we didn't rent it out, it's a community center, but we did have it for an entire month. And we were able to decorate the different walls with the how the women became an organization, how the support of the university, how we did Photovoice together, all the different Photovoice results. And we called it the House of Dreams because it was some walls with all the women's priority in their photographs. And then we had made it into a house. So the Roma women wanted it to look like a Gitana house, so a Roma woman's house. And so we just pulled furniture from our houses, from everywhere we could, from our university, from their houses, everybody's. And we created this home that had this young girl's room, and we put all the girls' priorities and photographs in that room and made it into, people could come and do TikToks if they wanted. People could add their dreams. People could take photographs there as well. And also it was a place we had lots of different types of events. We really wanted to make it a special event for the women to have that recognition. And the reason I wanted to share this was that this all just started with photographs and how these photographs can really promote this type of process, and how a lot of the photographs we had taken many years ago were just as relevant then than they are today. And so it was nice to compile all of that together and really build on that narrative. And for us, this moment and this month-long Photovoice exhibit that we did was built by us. We all spent many hours of many days of weekends building the house together. And it was just goes to show deciding where we were putting photographs, what these photographs now mean when they're together instead of apart. And we had invited in the inaugural, the day that we decided it was ready to be open, we'd invited local policymakers, some students from our university, from the community, and it was just such a wonderful exchange of having those photographs there and being able to point at them when talking to the mayor, the Commission of Education, or the different types of policymakers and teachers that were there, being able to point out in photographs like, this is what's happening. Stop blaming our community for how this neighborhood is developing. This is how we're being treated. We're here to have a dialogue. We're here to listen. And even within the house, so you can see, I think in the bottom left photograph, those are a lot of different pictures that we kept adding. So we had this event, the inaugural event. We had an actual professional photographer come. So that was like a nice addition. So we had the Photovoice process, but then a local photographer came and took pictures of our Photovoice process as well. So it was like a Photovoice, a play within a play, a Photovoice within a Photovoice. And we ended up printing pictures throughout the month and adding it to the walls as well. And we were able to also continue to get data from the community. So we had different surveys, in the girls' room, we had an actual TikTok stand, which I don't think I ever used unless one of the girls told me, stand here and do this. But yeah, so this was very, very special for us. And I think a really good example of how Photovoice can just over time build and have that space and just become a space for dialogue. And here's a mother and a daughter who actually, they were from our colleagues up north who also were a part of this Photovoice process. And we went to Congress together, and the girl was there and was able, through the Photovoice photographs and recommendations, tell politicians what she needed to achieve her dreams. And this was really special because in Spain, this just doesn't happen. It doesn't happen with Roma women and Roma girls. And the impact that the photographs were getting in the media and our social media accounts, not mine because I'm not on social media, but other people's social media accounts, and the organization and the women's voices, how we were able to get there. And I think that having photographs, you can't turn away from that. And then I also wanted to share this because this was an interesting collaboration that we did as well. So there was a student working with us. She was from Vanderbilt, and she was doing her undergraduate, they call it a capstone project. I don't know, here in Sevilla, we would say like your undergraduate thesis. And so she was helping us with the Photovoice process, with the what are your dreams? What do you need to reach your dreams? And this activity was so wonderful because it was a way of reimagining how to use the photographs. So she developed, as part of her thesis, this pen pal program with the group of girls in Nashville, Tennessee, and the group of girls here in Sevilla. And utilizing TikTok and the photographs, they were able to communicate with each other because of the lack of, obviously they spoke English, the girls spoke Spanish, but being able to ask each other, like, what's your favorite this? Where are you from? And using the photographs and that same process to exchange with girls that otherwise maybe you wouldn't share any sort of exchange with, especially living in a neighborhood where even going to the center of town is complicated, and the amount of barriers that, and imagine going to the USA and talking to this group of girls. So this was a way, I thought it was a really creative idea. I think she did it so wonderfully in the way that it was so well adapted to both groups of girls. I thought it was a good example of just using digital tools for good and using photographs via digital tools for good purpose. And then tying back to this idea of co-creation and what type of impact can a Photovoice study have. And as social community psychologists, we think of things happening on various levels. So I think on a personal level, things are happening with researchers from universities, with the girls, with the women, with policymakers. When you're doing this type of process, there is just a change happening. Any sort of bias that I had or students had, or who don't really go into those neighborhoods and are having these exchanges, there is just change taking place. There's also the interpersonal changes happening. So there's a new sense of support, new allies, a more expansive network. I know we have students who've been gone for a year, but they're still in contact with the schools and with the girls in the pen pal program. And then we also have how different organizations were able to start supporting the grassroots organizations. So the Women of Jiro, they're a small women-led, completely grassroots organizations who has our support, but for us, it was important for them to have other organizational support as well, to be involved in different grassroots movements, and also mobilizing community members. So a lot of photographs are sometimes like reshared on Facebooks or shared in that type of way. And so I wanted to just highlight the different types and levels of impact, which in some cases, maybe many years ago, it was just more focused on the community level. And this last project, we were able to kind of interlace everything with the institutional level as well. But just seeing how over the years, we were able to address with that process different levels. And then just to end, I think I'm pretty good on time, actually. These are some final thoughts that I brainstormed, which I also told Erica to add to, but this is very ideas that I'm having and thinking about, which I don't have answers to. And I think something that I was expressing constantly throughout the presentation, which how will Photovoice, how are we going to seize digitalization? What new ethical implications does this imply when people are utilizing their personal phones, when we're using WhatsApp groups to communicate, and if researchers have to, instead of people adapting to the way research and the research process is done, it's actually the other way around if we want it to have real impact. And so if people are already taking photographs and generating their own evidence, how does that change and how is that reflected in the way that we're doing Photovoice? Because there's also something to be said, having a separate camera outside of your phone and creating some distance of a device that has other meaning in our day-to-day. And just finally, I think something I'm always thinking about is how are we addressing power dynamics when we're doing co-creation? What is co-creation? How are we thinking about it? How is that being defined? How is participation? Is it just a results-driven process, or is it actually a process-driven process? And one thing that I'm missing from the literature and maybe some learning resources that I'm interested in would be how are we sharing different facilitations tools, not for the framing questions, but also what are the questions we're asking when we're analyzing data with different groups. So that'd be an interesting thing to think through. And that's it. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Daniela. This was great. I was a fan even before we started, and then after hearing you out with the presentation and the work you've done with the exhibit that has really completely blown me away. I'd like to start to get the chat going with questions and reflections, because I know that there is a lot to unpack, but while the chat is going, I guess I'll ask my question for you, which touches on the ethical implications that you were just speaking about with the new media. So, for example, I'm thinking about the issue of being recognizable, right, over TikTok, for example, and sharing your photo voice there. How about, have you had, let's say, any issue with that, with the participants of like sharing other people's photos, for example?
No, it was never our idea from the university for girls to share things in the way that they were doing, and the women, and it was more of a very organic thing that was happening. So it wasn't that we were asking people by any means to share that, which is something that I'm starting to include. We have a new project which we'll be doing Photovoice in, and it's one of the ways that I'm thinking, how do I can't find a lot of examples either. How am I supposed to include, it's not my data, it's someone else's data. So how do I frame this in an ethical committee around if someone wants to share their own data and their own story and their own advocacy process on TikTok or on their Instagram or Facebook account, how do we go about that? And so we haven't had any, I mean, of course, when we've done any sort of photographs, we did do informed consent with families, with schools, with the girls as well. But now with the whole social media thing, it's just kind of changing the landscape, especially when the principles around what we're doing is that we're not doing extractive research. We're just supporting people in owning their own data. And so I'm not quite sure. So I'm open to ideas. And if anyone has any sort of resources around that, I'd be very happy to learn.
Yes, and feel free to unmute yourself also to respond to Daniela. And thank you for touching on this. I also wanted to share, Daniela wrote a beautiful blog for us, When Everything is Photovoice, moving the conversation forward. I'm dropping the link in the chat. And while we receive more questions, I guess I was also curious about the pen pal program and how that worked with the photos, and how did they share the pictures with one another, and what are some of the learnings that you did from that?
So that was, so the group of girls in the US were the girl who led, it was like a young women's group, and the leader of that young women's group was really good friends with the Vanderbilt student we had. And so what what her name is Cambry. So what Cambry would do with my colleagues here in Sevilla was translate the questions with each other. And so what's your favorite thing to do? And it would be dancing. And so they would do a video, or they would show a photograph, and then they would share it via email with the girls there, and do Zooms and share that type of content with one another. And so it would just be the same question translated to both group of girls. And then they would just be like cracking up, laughing at the girls, listening to English, not understanding, and thinking it was hilarious. And it was very special.
Absolutely. I bet it was. Thank you. And do we have any more questions? I see, Laura. What types of conversations happened among policymakers, decision makers, participants, and community members during the month of outreach? Thank you for that question, Laura.
Good question. And there's, of course, such a spectrum of things that had happened. So it was in the inaugural day, and I'm actually glad that this is recording. On the inaugural day, so in this neighborhood, it has a very important, peculiar government figure, which is supposed to be the link between all the organizations and all the plans and policies that are being implemented to improve this neighborhood, but connected to the city council and through the regional government. And so that figure doesn't exist in any other neighborhood in Spain. And I don't think it tends to exist in many other places either. And so it's called like a commissioner, and the commissioner is there, and the commissioner came. And recently there was a shift in government. So anytime there's like a new government in the regional government, there's a change in the commissioners, who the commissioner is. And so the commissioner actually came and was very aggressive towards the women, saying that actually, the reason that all this trash is in the neighborhood, or because we can't do anything here, is your fault. But the way that the space was set up was the women were on the platform, the photographs were all around them, the media was there. So it was really powerful being able to like capture that. It was hard to watch, but also powerful to watch the women defending themselves, but then other organizations, other policymakers, other researchers like coming to defend. And so it was actually just a good stage for that to happen, because it was being caught. There's actually the other day, some of the women and I went to Madrid, and one of them was like, does anybody have that moment captured on camera? And someone's like, oh, I put it on my TikTok. You have so many likes from like months ago. And there's a moment where she's saying like, this isn't our fault. Like, we're showing you the photographs. We're showing you what's happening. We're telling you what's happening. It's not our fault. And so it's like a powerful way to watch that all just like the evidence, the alliances, the network, the sense of community that was there. And then there was also really positive experiences too, where recently the women have been invited to develop like a local plan, other projects, other organizations are calling them to do work with them. And so there was really good impacts in that way. And then more immediate short-term negative interactions, but that have had more positive repercussions because it happened, and the way that it happened, and the space that it happened. Because I remember she said, my colleague from Gilo, she said, you don't come into someone's house and speak to them that way. And it was perfect. Like the way, and especially in Spanish, it sounded really powerful as well.
Wow. Thank you, Daniela. Sounds like practice in strengthening critical consciousness among participants and maybe also decision makers.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. For me, it was absolutely as well. to see those dynamics play out in that space.
Thank you so much for sharing all of these experiences, Daniela. If anybody would like also to unmute to ask any question to Daniela. Laura is really curious about the project. What are some next steps? And so is Krasan actually asking the same thing. What's next? How do you plan to keep the momentum going?
Well, we're going to go up north to support some colleagues and a group of women there to do a similar Photovoice exhibit. And so instead of the researchers going to do the capacity building for Photovoice, actually our colleagues from GILO, from the organizations, are going to be going. And we're also continuing this work. One of the outcomes that we've had from this Photovoice experience was the mother-daughter relationship. It was like a very powerful relationship when it came to that advocacy space and that learning process, the mutual learning process. And so now we're implementing a project which we're going to use Photovoice, but we're going to do it with the mothers and daughters together.
And we look forward to hearing more about that project too. I see one question. Was this a mixed method project? I missed the first part of the session, but if so, what other methods were adopted? Thank you. Thanks, Alison.
Yeah, so this project as a whole, we did Photovoice. We also did community surveys. Trying to think what else we did. We did do focus groups at the beginning and scoping reviews. So I think there's a lot of different legs to this project. And I think Photovoice is the heart of the project, but I mean, definitely for the preparation, there were like informal meetings. Then we had a lot of focus groups with different types of stakeholders. So teachers, other women, and we did community mapping, the Photovoice, and then the advocacy processes.
Thank you. I just wondered, was there any sort of training that you did with the participants early on?
Yes. So we actually, and I could send that to Erica and she could share that as well. We have, I think we do have it translated, and we do have it in English because the one we've used recently was a handbook that we had developed for one of our first projects, but we did do a first phase of capacity building with the women. So we actually did a first Photovoice with the women who ended up being the ones who did the main part of the facilitation with the girls. So it was like a role reversal. And then with the girls, there were a lot of different things that had to take place. So for example, take a picture of something that makes you happy. Take a picture of something that makes you sad. We did a lot of different types of like developing that abstract thinking. And so there was also games around categorizing. So bringing different types of candies. We had found this YouTube video many years ago of ways to teach categorization, like data analysis is categorizing. And so how could we do it in an interactive way? And so we bought a lot of different types of candy. And so it's like, okay, by color, by shape, by type, and then doing it in that type of way. And then one thing that's worked across a lot of contexts with our younger co-researchers is a Photovoice hunt, kind of. The way that they say it in Spanish, I don't know how to translate it, but basically be like, okay, go take a picture of something green. Second, like a race to get through like 10 different points just to get used to thinking in terms of you and your camera. And so we did a lot of different activities that involved the camera, but then categorizing as well, and group discussion.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and it would be really great to see how you put that in place. Spanish would do too, but I'm just interested.
Well, now things translate on Google, at least on Google.
No, it's fine. I speak Spanish, so it'll be easy enough too. But thank you.
Perfect. I think it might be on the project website, but check.
Thank you, Daniela.
A scavenger hunt, that's the word. Thank you. Living between two languages sometimes.
Thank you, Daniela, for this presentation. We'll see if we have more questions coming up, but there were so many aspects of the project that were incredibly exciting for me to hear about. And I think for everyone, we've all done a lot of learning today. We invite you to contribute to the conversation even later on. We're on every social platform at PhotovoiceWorldwide. You can send us an email. You can get in contact with Daniela through us as well. And you can read our blog as well on our website. We thank you very much.
Share,
Mhm.
Sorry, Erica, I'm going to share this project. And I think if you go into the toolbox there, you could find, oh wait, so all. Hold on. Now I don't know what I'm doing. Here, Eric, I'm sending it to you because it's not letting me send through the group. But if you go on that research project page, you can just click on that. And I think if you go to the toolbox section, there should be the guides to download, and you'll see like facilitator guide for this specific project.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, for your generosity to share with us and to keep inspiring others. We look forward to hearing about the new project with the mother daughters. We have a lot of people saying thank you for your presentation and for being in community with us today, Daniela, and for everyone that joined us. I know we had some hiccups at the beginning, but I'm so glad to see you all here. Thank you, Lucas, and Marcy as well.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. On behalf of PhotoVoice Worldwide,